Listen, do you hear that? Heavy breathing through metal. Each breath a struggle. The sound of someone fighting just to stay alive. Picture this. It's the 25th of November, 1177. A 16-year-old kid sits on horseback, fingers wrapped in cloth that started the day, white but now looks like dried blood. Under those wrappings, his skin is literally falling apart, bones visible where flesh used to be. This disease doesn't just end your life, it takes you apart slowly while you watch. The silver face covering isn't for show, it hides something no soldier wants to see. Look ahead. 3 miles away, the entire skyline has vanished behind an army. 26,000 mounted fighters stretching so far that their dust looks like ocean mist rolling inland. Flags in green, black, and gold crack like predator wings in the wind. Leading them is Sultan Saladin. He's 40, never been beaten in battle. So certain of tomorrow's win that he's already sent word to Damascus describing the celebration. Behind the masked teenager? 500 knights. That's the whole force. 500 worn-out warriors on tired horses, armor dented from previous fights, weapons that have seen better days. Do the calculation. 52 opponents for each defender. Those aren't fighting odds. That's choosing between giving up or getting slaughtered. Every advisor begged him to hide inside Jerusalem's walls. Every military manual ever written calls this a death wish. Even his own failing body, nerves destroyed, joints swelling, skin tearing open, is telling him to turn back. But Baldwin IV does something nobody expected. He orders the attack. What unfolds in the next few hours will confuse everyone who tries to make sense of it. Christian writers will say heaven intervened. Muslim historians will call it divine punishment. Modern war experts will study it for generations and still can't explain the numbers. But here's the part they leave out about Montgisard. The fight was finished before it started. Saladin had done everything right. His troops were rested, well fed, positioned on ideal ground for cavalry. His officers knew their work. His soldiers were elite Mamluks, trained since childhood for combat. The Crusaders were outnumbered 52-1. So how did 20,000 of Islam's best fighters end up dead in one afternoon? The answer isn't what you expect, and it begins with a choice. Saladin made 3 days before, a choice so reasonable, so clearly smart, that it destroyed everything he'd achieved. Before we dive into how history broke apart, quick note. If you're someone who gets drawn into these documented moments from history, the ones textbooks somehow make boring, hitting subscribe helps us keep digging through archives to find more stories like this. All right, back to November 1177. And the most dangerous leader in the Holy Land is about to make his first error, Jerusalem. In 1177 isn't the shining city from religious art, it's dying. Walls fractured from 80 years of attacks, streets half empty because anyone smart left months ago. Christianity's holiest city, protected by fewer fighters than a typical modern school, has students. The kingdom survives on willpower and delusion, and ruling it is a 16-year-old whose body is destroying itself. Baldwin IV wasn't meant to be king. He wasn't even supposed to survive childhood. Leprosy in medieval times isn't just sickness. It's proof of divine anger made visible. Sufferers carry bells to warn others. They're buried without markers, deleted from family trees, treated as already dead the moment white spots appear. But Baldwin's father, King Amalric, recognized something in his son that illness couldn't erase. Sharp thinking, mental clarity, a mind that solved problems like a knife cutting silk. So when Amalric died unexpectedly in 1174, the crown passed to a 13-year-old who would never wed, never father children, whose realm was already being written off. Facing this crumbling kingdom stands Saladin, born Yusuf ibn Ayyub, climbed from military leader to sultan through strategic brilliance that would impress the greatest minds. By 1177 he's accomplished what generations couldn't, uniting Egypt and Syria under one banner. One goal, reclaim Jerusalem. He's 40 at the height of his power, commanding unlimited wealth from Egyptian commerce, warriors from countless regions, siege weapons that crack fortresses like pottery. And here's the frightening part. Saladin isn't evil. He's devout, diplomatic, admired even by opponents. He honors warfare customs, but customs mean nothing when facing destruction. By fall 1177, Europe has abandoned sending aid. They've given up on Jerusalem. Even the Pope is quietly planning for after it falls. If this moment doesn't show you how close we came to watching civilization turn on the actions of a dying teenager and 500 desperate warriors, you're missing what our ancestors died trying to teach us. The world ignores your chances. It only respects your determination. But there's something else about Baldwin that chronicles mention briefly, almost awkwardly. He grinned before combat. Not fake courage, real excitement. A diseased king whose damaged nerves meant he couldn't register pain anymore, who had nothing remaining to lose, smiling behind that silver mask, as forces 20 times his size gathered on the horizon. Consider what that means. Pain is your warning system. It signals when to quit, when you've pushed too far. Baldwin's warning system was destroyed. He could go beyond every limit that would drop a normal person, and he wouldn't know until something actually broke. Saladin, despite his genius, never grasped this. He was about to discover it. November 23, 1177. Saladin's forces enter Crusader lands like floodwater, breaching a dam. 26,000 mounted fighters. Just the supply convoy stretches for miles. Tents, provisions, siege machinery, portable workshops to fix weapons. This isn't a raid, it's an invasion meant to permanently end the Crusader presence in the Holy Land. A Muslim writer records, the faithful's banners covered the hillsides like stars dropped to earth. The horse hooves sounded like endless thunder. Saladin's strategy is textbook perfect. Skip the fortress at Ascalon. It's defended and fortified. Why waste time besieging it? Sweep north along the coast, cutting Jerusalem from the sea. Choke the supply routes. Wait for hunger and internal breakdown. He's executed this before. It never fails. Inside Jerusalem, the circumstances are beyond desperate. They're mathematically impossible. Baldwin's counselors, the few nobles who haven't fled yet, present the figures in the throne room. City defenders, 750, mostly foot soldiers. Available knights, maybe 500 if they call in every debt. Templar backup, 80 warrior monks, already exhausted from holding border castles, against Saladin's 26,000. Raymond of Tripoli, one of the kingdom's most seasoned commanders, states it clearly. My lord, we should negotiate surrender terms while we have leverage. If we ride out, we perish. If we perish, the kingdom ends with us. The chamber goes quiet. Baldwin sits collapsed in his throne. Standing for more than minutes makes his joints swell and crack. His advisors watch him shaking with the effort of remaining upright. But understand what he's considering. If he stays behind Jerusalem's walls, the city might last weeks, possibly months, with strict rationing. But Saladin will torch every settlement, every farm, every chapel within 50 miles. The civilian population will suffer gradually, horribly. If he rides out with 500 knights, they die fast. But Saladin's army, occupied killing knights in open combat, might lack time to devastate the countryside. The farmers might survive long enough for European help to arrive. It's not choosing between winning and losing. It's choosing between dying with meaning or dying slowly, while watching everyone else suffer first. Baldwin raises his head. The silver covering catches firelight. Raymond, how quickly can Saladin's forces move when spread out gathering supplies? The question puzzles everyone. Raymond frowns. Slower than normal, my lord. They'd need time to reorganize formations, but... And if we strike them while they're scattered? The room freezes. My lord, respectfully, Raymond gestures at Baldwin's wrapped hands, his wasted body. You can barely climb onto a horse without help. My hands can grip reins. That's all they need to do. What follows is documented by multiple sources, Christian and Muslim both, because what follows is so crazy that nobody accepts it until enemy accounts confirm every detail. November 24th. Baldwin IV is transported on a stretcher because his legs can't manage the palace steps. He's brought to the royal weapons room. Knights assist strapping his armor on. His hands are so ruined the fingers won't close right. They must tie the blade to his wrist with leather cords. He commands the entire available force to ready for immediate departure. 500 knights, 80 Templars, 3,000 infantry, north towards Saladin's army. Odo of Saint Amand, the Templar commander, a scarred veteran of countless battles, actually cries when he sees Baldwin lifted onto his war horse. The king's frame must be strapped to the saddle. His legs no longer possess the strength to hold on. They travel at night 45 miles in 36 hours. For perspective, that speed would exhaust healthy cavalry in fair conditions. For warriors carrying a dying monarch and knowing they march towards certain death, it's nearly superhuman. But here's where things get weird. As they travel, Baldwin keeps asking his scouts identical questions. Is Saladin still advancing north? Yes, my lord. Is his army still dispersed? Yes, my lord. And each time, Baldwin, drained, feverish, kept upright in his saddle purely by determination, grins beneath his mask. His knights don't comprehend. They assume it's fever delirium, the mind cracking under strain. They're mistaken. Baldwin has noticed something, identified a pattern in Saladin's actions that nobody else has spotted. He's betting on Saladin being intelligent, on Saladin making the sensible choice, the proper choice, the choice that will destroy him. November 25th, sunrise over ground that will be drenched in blood by evening. Saladin gets his first alert just after dawn. A scout arrives, horse exhausted and foaming. My lord, Crusader flags, northern ridge. Saladin doesn't glance up from his morning meal. A patrol. They'll retreat when they spot our numbers. My lord, the scout's voice trembles. There are hundreds, maybe thousands. Now Saladin looks up, and for the first time in his career, the unbeaten Sultan of Egypt and Syria understands he's made an error. His army, confident, careless, after days of easy marching, scattered across 3 miles of countryside raiding farms and resting mounts, is caught totally unprepared. And worse, standing on that ridge, outlined against the climbing sun, is a figure in armor crowned with a silver mask that reflects light like a second sunrise. One of Saladin's officers whispers, "Is that the diseased king?" Saladin stares, then quietly, "May God protect us." He actually came. What Saladin doesn't realize yet, what nobody except Baldwin comprehends, is that this battle won't be settled by numbers or weapons or advanced tactics. It will be settled by pain, or specifically the total absence of feeling it. 2 in the afternoon, November 25th, 1177. The air reeks of horse sweat and terror. Baldwin's 500 knights have arranged into a wedge formation. At the point, 80 Templars in white robes marked with blood-red crosses, warriors who've sworn to never fall back, never quit, never beg for mercy. Behind them, exhausted regular knights who said farewell to their families yesterday, knowing they wouldn't see them again. And leading this impossibly outnumbered formation tied to his horse like a corpse being moved for burial is Baldwin IV. His advisors are yelling at him one final time, "My lord, we can still withdraw. Regroup it." Baldwin lifts his bandaged right hand. The movement shouldn't be achievable. His fingers barely work. But somehow, impossibly, he raises that hand high enough for 500 warriors to witness it, and he drops it forward. The signal to attack. You're one of those knights in that instant. You're about to charge 26,000 fighters, 52 enemies for each of you. The math of your death is already done. You'll be remembered as courageous, perhaps, but mainly just dead. Leading you is a 16-year-old whose flesh is literally rotting away, who must be tied to his mount to stay on, who should be in a monastery praying, not on a battlefield fighting. But then you witness something that transforms everything. As the charge starts, as 500 horses surge ahead and the earth begins trembling, Baldwin leans into his saddle. You can't see his expression behind that silver mask, but you know he's grinning. And you think, if he's not scared to die, why should I be? At 400 yards, Saladin's dispersed troops start rushing to create defensive formations. Too late. At 300 yards, Muslim archers shoot. Arrows descend like dark rain. Knights fall. Horses shriek and collapse. The charge doesn't pause. At 200 yards, Saladin himself is screaming commands, attempting to rally his center. His elite Mamluks, 8,000 slave warriors trained from infancy to kill, are forming ranks as rapidly as possible. But they're frightened, not of the numbers, of the insanity charging at them. At 100 yards, Baldwin does something no historian can clarify. He pulls his sword. His hands don't function. The weapon is tied to his wrist. He shouldn't be capable of lifting it, but he hoists that blade overhead. And 500 knights behind him watch their dying ruler holding steel toward heaven, and they roar, not a war shout, but something raw, something that sounds like rage and sorrow and belief all burning as one. At 50 yards, Muslim horses start backing away. Animals sense things. They smell death approaching. At 10 yards, Muslim fighters in the front lines drop their weapons and flee. 2:15 in the afternoon, the Templar wedge slams into Saladin's center like heaven's hammer, punching through paper. The noise isn't what you'd imagine. It's not clean, metallic clashing, it's organic, crushing, filled with screaming. Horses, warriors, the atmosphere itself seems to scream. In the first 30 seconds, 300 Mamluks simply stop existing. Trampled beneath charging war horses bred specifically as weapons, pierced through by spears moving at full speed, crushed under the mass of armored warriors moving at 20 miles per hour. But here's where it becomes impossible to believe. The charge doesn't halt. Cavalry attacks are supposed to hit hard, wheel around, regroup. It's fundamental tactics taught to every knight from youth. The Templars keep advancing. They drive through the Muslim center like steel through meat. And behind them, Baldwin's regular knights flood into the opening, expanding it, transforming it into a wound that won't seal. 2:30 in the afternoon. Saladin's center, 8,000 fighters who've never lost combat, shatters, not withdraws in organized fashion, not falls back to backup positions, shatters. Warriors dropping weapons, ripping off armor because it's too heavy to run in, trampling each other in panic to escape those white robes, with red crosses that just keep coming, keep killing, don't pause, won't pause, can't be stopped. Saladin himself is screaming at his commanders, reorganize, reform the formation. Nobody's paying attention because something impossible is occurring. That dying youth on the dying horse is slicing through their formations like he can predict the future, and his knights are following him like he's carved a path straight to paradise. And everywhere the silver mask turns, Muslim warriors run, and here's where Baldwin's smile finally makes sense. Those ravines cutting through the plain, the ones Saladin hadn't bothered examining because he figured he'd never need to retreat, they're channeling the fleeing Muslims into natural traps. Knights chase and suddenly thousands of fighters are stuck in narrow gorges with steep sides, trampling each other, suffocating under the weight of their own terror. A Christian writer will later document the ravines filled with corpses like cisterns, filling with water until the dead created bridges for the dying to walk across. A Muslim historian will verify it. We fled into the earth's jaws and the earth consumed us. 3 in the afternoon. Saladin's personal bodyguard, 2,000 of the finest warriors in the Muslim world, sworn by sacred vow to perish before abandoning their sultan, sees the Templars approaching and they flee. Saladin, deserted, encircled, does the only thing possible. He locates a racing camel, quicker than horses in sand, and escapes. The Sultan of Egypt and Syria, who'd never been defeated, who commanded 26,000 warriors that morning, is running for his life on a pack animal. By 4 in the afternoon it's finished. 20,000 Muslim fighters lie dead or dying across 3 miles of blood-drenched earth. Another 6,000 have vanished into the desert, abandoning weapons, armor supplies, anything that might slow their escape. Of Baldwin's 3,500 who fought, 1,100 are dead. Significant casualties, but they've succeeded. They've accomplished the impossible. When they finally remove Baldwin from his horse, he's unconscious. The straps securing him to the saddle are the only reason he didn't fall during combat. His bandages are soaked with blood, injuries reopened by the sheer physical strain of wielding a weapon his hands shouldn't have managed to grip. The knights believe he's gone. Odo of Saint Amand, the Templar commander, checks for breathing, finds it, barely. He's crying openly as he tells the knights gathered near. He can't register pain, that's how he managed it. He can't feel his body failing, so he never stopped. He never knew when to quit. You've just watched 500 warriors defeat 26,000. Not because they were tougher, not because they possessed superior gear, not because they were more numerous, but because they followed a youth who'd already lost everything except his determination to fight. If that doesn't show you how much one moment, one choice, one person can alter everything, then you're not hearing the lesson written in blood across that battlefield. Hit subscribe to this channel because these aren't just tales. They're warnings about what occurs when human determination collides with human calculation. But here's what nobody mentions about Montgisard. Saladin didn't remain defeated, and Baldwin had won the fight but lost something far worse in the process. The night following Montgisard, Jerusalem lights candles in every window. Church bells ring for 72 hours continuously. Religious leaders call it a miracle. Common people who'd been preparing to evacuate are celebrating in the streets. Baldwin IV is being praised as a second Judas Maccabeus, the warrior who rescued God's people against impossible chances. But in the royal chambers, doctors are debating whether to amputate. The strain of combat has accelerated Baldwin's leprosy catastrophically. Tissue that was merely damaged is now dead, infections spreading through flesh that can't properly heal. His hands, which somehow gripped a blade for 3 hours, are swollen double their normal size and leaking infection through the wrappings. He's 16 and his body is dying faster now because of what he did to preserve his kingdom. The material gains from Montgisard are enormous. Saladin abandoned his complete supply convoy. Tents, weapons, gold, provisions for 26,000 warriors, all becomes Crusader property overnight. The Templars alone capture enough military gear to equip every Christian fortress in the region. Saladin's war treasury, literal tons of gold intended to compensate his soldiers for the coming Jerusalem siege, now finances the Crusader kingdom for 2 years. Castles that were drafting surrender documents are suddenly reinforcing defenses again. European kingdoms that had abandoned Jerusalem start dispatching reinforcements. For the first time in decades, the Crusader states aren't just surviving, they're prevailing. But in Cairo and Damascus, the defeat is devastating. Saladin's reputation, constructed over 15 years of careful conquest and diplomatic skill, crumbles overnight. Muslim chroniclers struggle to rationalize it. How does Islam's sword lose 20,000 fighters to 500 knights? Ibn al-Athir documents. This was the most horrific catastrophe to strike the believers in this era. Another chronicler is more direct. God abandoned us that day. The genuine damage isn't military, it's mental. Saladin had unified the divided Muslim world under one concept: unavoidable victory. One campaign, one battle, and Jerusalem would return to Islamic control. Now, regional rulers in Egypt are quietly arranging separate peace agreements. Syrian lords are questioning whether Saladin is God's chosen leader or just someone who got fortunate until he didn't. It requires Saladin 10 years to reconstruct what Baldwin demolished in 3 hours. 10 years. But here's the section that should disturb you. Baldwin's physicians inform him he has perhaps 6 months remaining, a year maximum. The disease is too advanced. The battle accelerated deterioration beyond any possibility of recovery. He survives 8 more years. 8 years of escalating suffering, losing his vision, losing movement, eventually unable to even grasp a pen or feed himself. But his intellect, sharp as crystal until the final moment. And during those 8 years, he protects Jerusalem against Saladin 3 additional times, never with more than 1,000 knights, never losing. There's an instance in 1183, 6 years following Montgisard, when Saladin and Baldwin meet under a peace flag to arrange prisoner swaps. Baldwin is transported on a stretcher. He's blind now, can't walk, can barely whisper. Saladin observes this shattered youth who's haunted him for years and says something that Muslim chroniclers faithfully preserved. I cannot comprehend how God could place such a mind in such a body. Baldwin's reply, whispered through a translator because his voice is too weak to carry, perhaps so that when I succeed, Nobody can attribute it to physical strength alone. Saladin departs in silence. And here's the final turn that recontextualizes everything. When Baldwin IV finally passes in 1185, age 24, body ruined, legacy established, Saladin waits exactly 2 years. Then he takes Jerusalem. Without Baldwin, the Crusader territories crumble in months. The kingdom he rescued with 500 knights at Montgisard collapses without him because he was the kingdom. His successors surrender in years what Baldwin defended for 8. So did he triumph or just postpone the unavoidable? Montgisard teaches something that frightens military historians. Numbers don't matter as much as we believe they do. The Pentagon maintains entire divisions dedicated to computing force ratios, logistics, material superiority. We've constructed civilizations on the concept that more equals better, that mathematics determines results. And then you have November 25th, 1177, 500 against 26,000 and the 500 triumph. Not because of advanced tactics, though Baldwin's were exceptional. Not because of terrain benefits, though he exploited it masterfully. Not because of superior equipment, because they lacked it. They succeeded because one dying youth refused to accept that mathematics controls destiny. Baldwin IV grasped something we've forgotten. The human will, when driven past the threshold of self-preservation, when liberated from pain's fear because pain no longer registers, becomes a force that logic cannot measure. He couldn't feel his body collapsing, so he never knew when to quit. And 500 warriors watching their monarch fight despite a frame that should have failed hours earlier, decided that if he wouldn't surrender, neither would they. We exist in an age obsessed with probabilities. Computer programs tell us which investments to make. Surveys predict electoral outcomes before ballots are counted. Statistical models forecast conflicts based on economic data and troop counts. Perhaps we've sacrificed something crucial in all that computation. The recognition that history turns on moments when someone refuses to accept the mathematics. When 500 becomes more lethal than 26,000. Because those 500 believe in something, the 26,000 don't. There's a letter Baldwin composed to his sister Sibylla shortly before his passing. It's preserved in the Vatican archives, aged and delicate. In it he writes, "I was informed I would perish young. They were correct. I was informed I would perish diseased. They were correct. I was informed I could not govern. They were incorrect. Perhaps God gives us afflictions to demonstrate that flesh is temporary, but determination is eternal. My hand ceased functioning years ago, but my kingdom still exists." By the time she got that letter, Baldwin was already gone. 2 years afterward, the kingdom collapsed. But for 8 years that shouldn't have occurred, 8 years that defied medical possibility, one dying youth held back an empire. You've just experienced one of history's most fragile victories. A moment when everything, the realm, the faith, the existence of thousands, depended on the will of a teenager whose body was disintegrating. If stories like this remind you how delicate civilization is, how close we constantly are to losing everything, how much one person's refusal to surrender can transform the world, hit that subscribe button. Because the past isn't finished, it's just waiting for someone to recall it. And if you think Baldwin's story is intense, wait until you discover what we're covering next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.